Hi, my name is Abrah Arneson, and I'm a clinical herbal therapist in practice in Ottawa, Ontario, and at my home in the Gatineau Hills, Quebec. Uh, I really think herbal medicine is best taught in a holistic manner. In that, I mean that we need to look at the relationship between plants and the body and not kind of teach the body in this corner over here and teach the plants over here, but really teach it as a whole. This planet is a living organism, and we're all part of it, the plants and the human beings and the bacteria. And it's that profound relationship between all of life on this planet that is woven into herbal medicine. So these classes I'm calling anatomy and physiology, but really what they are is a weaving of trying to describe or find ways of talking about this profound dynamic web of life on this planet. And today I am going to try to do that by talking about the kidney and its relationship to plants and its relationship to our well-being. So thanks for coming, and let's get started. Okay, so always this little tricky piece there. So herbalist anatomy, the kidney, super curious organs. The kidney has taken me and continues to take me a long time to understand and figure out and what's going on with it, with plant medicine, and how does it support the health of the whole body. These two little organs kind of in your mid back towards your spine. So the kidneys, a big part of the kidneys is the water element, and the water element is sort of our most our shapeshifter of the elements. The water can be icy, cold, frozen. It can be a liquid. It can be a vapor. You know, we're all right now. Although we talk about we breathe through water. We lived in water when we were in utero, and it is the water that that we pass out of when we're born. But even right now, we're breathing water. There's moisture in the air, and we're breathing that in. And that's supporting the health and well-being of our respiratory tract. And then we're breathing water back out. There are water molecules all throughout that atmosphere. So just a thought about water. And the kidneys, ultimately, they're in charge of the water element in our body. You cannot think about kidneys and not thinking about water. Okay. So here's the kidneys. The kidneys are like a sponge. And I remember when I was a student and we did cadaver anatomy, and we picked up the kidneys and we squeezed them just very gently. And it was like squeezing a sponge. This fluid, urine basically, was coming out of the kidneys. Even though these were dead bodies filled with formaldehyde, they were still full of moisture, the kidneys. They're like a wet sponge, and they like to be wet. You know, when you get these loofah sponges and they're hard and dry, that's a very, very unhappy. You could think of that as a very, very unhappy kidney that needs a lot of moisture brought to it. So you would use moistening herbs. And soft, they would be soft and moist. So the water element controls the fire element in our body, you could think. Though it's with the water element that the fire element moves through our body. So for example, in the blood, but also the water, when we overheat, the water element carries heat out of our body, either on our breath, again, removing the air the water carrying the heat out of our body, or with sweat, or even urine will heat up. And if you're really hot and you pee, that will carry the fire element out of your body, which is why it's really important to stay really hydrated in heat. So there's this relationship between the water element and the fire element, and the kidneys very much are involved in keeping those two elements in our body in balance. And the kidneys like to be warm and moist. So keep that. That's the energetics you need to think about with the kidneys, warm and moist. So, nature is economical. And when nature finds something that works, I know I'm offering something here to nature that not everybody agrees with, but there's patterns. And nature repeats patterns. And the kidney pattern of all its work is found in nature. And one of the places where we find the work of the kidney in nature is in wetlands. And wetlands store water when there's too much, and then offer up water to surrounding tissues when there's too little. The kidneys are very much involved in the conservation of fluid and the releasing of fluid in the body. They prevent flooding. So, the kidney will dump fluids if there's too much fluid in the body. They also, the wetlands also control the movement of minerals, the earth throughout the body. They help stop erosion. They help keep the earth where it needs to be. And the kidneys control the mineral balance in the body. And minerals can be thought of like the earth element. The kidneys, the wetlands are also profound processors of toxins in the environment. It's a bit tricky. There's a lot of reclamation plants that grow. So reclamation plants are plants that clear toxins out of the environment, that grow in wetlands, but also the soil underneath the wetlands. They're reservoirs for toxins, so that they float out of the water and are stored in the earth. And the same thing with the kidneys. The kidneys are very much processors of toxins. And we're going to talk a lot about toxins during this talk, because toxins have a profound effect on the kidneys, and the kidneys have a profound ability to help us remove toxins from our body. So goldenrod is a classic kidney herb, and tough. Where I live, there's a lot of goldenrod. It's just finished flowering right now. A couple of weeks ago, everything was this beautiful golden yellow. All the meadows and fields were this beautiful golden yellow. I find the flowers extremely difficult to dry. They always go to fluffy seed on me right away. So I tend to harvest the flowers for medicine when the bees are on them. I always follow the lead of the bees for harvesting medicine. So I harvest them when the bees are on them, and then I fresh plant tincture them, and I use them as a diuretic. The leaves are much easier to dry, and the leaves are a very tasty tea, high in volatile oils. Volatile oils are excreted from the body through the kidney. We'll talk about that again when we talk about urinary tract infections. But that volatile oil, plants high in volatile oils, some people call them aromatics. They are natural diuretics, because those oils, those terpenes, also called terpenes, they irritate the lining of the glomeruli, which we'll get to in a second, and create an excess excretion of fluids trying to get them out. The kidney reads them as a toxin, in other words. So goldenrod, and I'll tell you a goldenrod story. This woman came to see me a while ago, and she was puffy. Everything about her was puffy. She had puffy under her eyes. Her skin, when you felt it, was puffy. She had lots of dimpling. She just was puffy. And I thought, puffy, goldenrod, keyword for goldenrod puppy. And I gave her goldenrod leaf in tea along with a couple of other plants. And she lost 20 pounds of water in 6 weeks. So, yeah, the body will store water when the kidney is not happening. And goldenrod tended to fix that problem for her. Okay, another place where we find an action similar to the kidney is in peat moss. Peat moss is actually also an at-risk plant. So I really do not suggest you go and buy those big bales of peat moss for your gardens anymore. It's at risk in the UK anyways. So these guys, this moss will hold up to 26 times its weight when it's dry. And that's what the kidneys are wet. They're moist. When you squeeze them in like a moss, the water comes out. These little leaves, I'm actually not sure what my correct botanical term is for moss's parts, body parts, are very thin and often single cell. And the single cell tubes that make up the moss, they allow the flow of nutrients and fluid in and out of the tissues of the moss very quickly and in a good way with great efficiency, very much like the glomeruli in kidneys, single cell tubes that allow the movement of fluids in and out, along with all sorts of different, like especially the electrolytes or the minerals, they flow in and out, bacteria, toxins, sorts of things. Moss has a high uptake, like the kidney, of toxins, heavy metals in particular. A great way to clean up the environment. They actually have been making septic systems with moss, with the peat moss, and they're very effective at cleaning up the waste product that comes through toilets. And they're also, the peat moss is acidic in nature and has, therefore it manages the microbiome of whatever environment it's in. So the moss is like a kidney. So let's talk about the glomerulus. So this is the inner little tubes or capsules inside your kidney that's doing all the work. And these are single cell tubes, and they come in, the blood comes in, and it's filtered through here, and then it runs around in here, and it gets filtered out. And it comes back out, either filtered, and the filtrate that the electrolytes that the body's ready to let go, the hydrogen ions, the heavy metals, the uric acid, the ammonium, the nitrates, they all get sent out this way to the ureter, to the bladder, to be voided. So these work in a very similar way as the moss, single cell tubes. And here's an image of a glomeruli. Where have we seen this image before? Here they are inside the Bowman capsule. That's what the capsule that contains the glomeruli are called, a Bowman capsule. So here they are. And here, I don't know if you can see that very easily, but here is an image of a glomeruli. Of course, they're not this color. These are dyes that are used to pull these really delicate tissues out so that we can see them. There's a profound relationship between sweat glands in our skin and the glomeruli. And if you look at a sweat gland, it even has like a similar kind of shape. And again, we have this tubule situation that opens up to the outer surface of the body. And I have worked, I worked in hospice care for a while. And some of the people we worked with were on dialysis, so their kidney function was pretty much at zero. And their urine, their skin smelled like urine, and was very yellow. So that's like the sweat gland actually takes over as best as it can. It's not as efficient as kidneys, but it does take over the function of the kidneys of releasing toxins, uric acid, ammonia, nitrates out through the skin if the kidneys aren't functioning. And one of the first really critical signs that there's a big challenge in the kidney is itchy skin, like itchy all over and driving you crazy itchy. It's really critical that a person in that situation go to the doctor and get their kidneys looked at, because that's the sweat glands sending the uric acid out, causing all that itch. So sweat glands and the kidney, there's a very profound relationship between those two. So we've been talking about heavy metals, and cilantro is a great plant to help move heavy metals out of the body. It's also a diuretic, high in volatile oils, so it has that irritating action on the glomeruli to create an increase in urine output, and it gathers up heavy metals and we release them through our kidney. I love this plant because it's so easy to grow. It self-seeds every year in my garden, and it has its own little area where it grows and self-seeds. I often make fresh plant tincture with it, and it grows in all different stages. Like sometimes you'll have some seeds, sometimes you'll have some nice fresh green leaves, sometimes you'll have some flowers, and they're growing all at different stages all through the year, all through the growing season. And so often, most of my tincture, I use fresh seeds, but I also will throw in some leaf in that fresh plant tincture. And I find people really find it effective. Coriander is cilantro. It's just different language. Yeah. So if someone says coriander, they mean cilantro. Say cilantro, they mean coriander. Same plant. Linden flower isn't often thought of a plant for the kidney, but I use it for kidney all the time. There's a whole pile of reasons I like linden flower for the kidney. And one of the things you can think about the kidney is it's often associated with the urinary tract, but it's really associated it's closely with the circulatory system. And it's all these really fine single cell blood vessels inside the kidneys. That's what it is. And linden flower, I'm taking the lead from David Hoffman here, is a demulcent for blood vessels. It's a healing, soothing plant for the interior blood vessels. And since the kidney is so rich in these single cell blood vessels, I feel like supporting them with a plant like linden is a really great thing. Linden also is a diaphoretic, so it means that a diaphoretic means that the blood vessels relax and the blood starts moving towards the periphery of the skin. Often these plants are used for fever, diaphoretics, to help clear the heat out of the center of the body to the periphery of the body. And if the kidneys there's too much tension in the kidneys, they build up heat, and heat dries tissues out. So this is another approach that I use a linden for, is to move the heat out of the core of the body to the surface of the body, releasing the tension and the heat in the kidneys while supporting and protecting those single cell blood vessels that line and do all the work in the kidney. So the kidneys are really part of the circulatory system, not just the urinary tract. So 4 ways kidneys support health. So I like to show these images because people don't always know where everything is. So, and obviously this is a 2-dimensional object. Everything looks kind of hard, and things move around in the body, especially as you get older, tendons and ligaments get loose or tight, stuff moves, things get swollen, stuff happens. So generally the kidneys are in the back, towards the back. This is the small intestine. They're in behind the pancreas here. This spleen, if there was a spleen, would be here. This would be the diaphragm across here. The stomach isn't present here, but see how it's very closely related to both this artery and this vein, these major delivery and removal of blood pathways through the core of the body. And the kidneys are directly related to that. So the 4 ways the kidneys support health. So alongside the lungs, the kidneys control the acid-alkaline balance of our body. And that's through the release of hydrogen molecules, hydrogen ions, which are created through the energy processes of the mitochondria. So there's excess hydrogen molecules created in that process, and the body has to release them. So we breathe them out. Exhaling creates, and inhaling creates an acid-alkaline balance with the lungs, as does our kidneys. And you'll see that if kidneys are challenged, people will kind of start panting, like that's very advanced, and the lungs are trying to control the acid-alkaline balance without the kidneys support. So this is a little bit technical stuff. I tend not to like to go here in these kind of classes, but just how the kidney controls the acid-alkaline balance in the body, and it's by using bicarbonate. And bicarbonate is essentially baking soda. So one of the ways to watch how alkaline baking soda is, if you have a lot of burning or digestive upset, or even bloating, maybe some heartburn, and you take a teaspoon of baking soda and put it in a glass of water, stir it up and drink it. If you have burning in your stomach or heartburn, it's gone like that. The problem is it forms a gas, and then there's a lot of bloating. However, if you burp right away, that clears the gas, and the burping actually will tell you that you have high stomach acids as opposed to low stomach acids. Sometimes people have a lot of digestive upset and challenges like heartburn with low stomach acids. So if that's the case, you'll know that you have low stomach acids if there's no burping or no bloating, because the bicarbonate is not interacting. Those acids aren't releasing, creating gas. Okay, yeah, so basically we pee out hydrogen molecules. It's in our pee. Yeah, so there's this really interesting, there's all this relationship between bones and kidneys. This relationship is really interesting. So kidney in the musculoskeletal system. And one of the things that happens is the body is overly acidic over a period of time. There's decay in the teeth. Tooth decay. So if people take lemon water every morning over an extended period of time, it will start decaying the enamel on the teeth and lead to tooth decay. That's just how it is. And a lot of people relate an acidic body, weak kidney, to tooth decay. So here, this guy who's a kidney specialist is talking about the relationship between chronic kidney disease and dental problems, and that sometimes you can see dental problems before the chronic kidney disease starts popping up. So the bones are teeth. So this would be systemic. So sometimes if someone comes to you and they have early osteoporosis or osteopenia, which is a weakening of the bones, You want to think about like absorption in the gut, but you also want to think about kidney function. Is it getting rid of those hydrogen? Are they acidic? So alfalfa is an amazing plant for helping the body clear uric acid, which gets stored in joints. It's an old gout remedy. It's amazing for clearing out uric acid from the body. It's a diuretic, but it's also really high in minerals that help alkaline the body. So it breaks up the uric acid that gets stored in the joints, which cause arthritis or gout. It also creates other minerals, which helps neutralize the acidic balance in the body, giving the hydrogen molecules something to attach to. And it also has a diuretic effect so that we clear those hydrogen molecules out of our body, alkalining the body. Another really great plant, especially if there's tooth involvement, is Self Heal. Self Heal is like appears all over in my backyard. I have little patches I let grow every year so that I can make medicine with it. It's considered a soothing demulcent with antiviral actions. They're showing that it's effective against herpes viruses. Matthew Woods notes it specifically for kidney challenges with accompanying challenges with teeth. So if there's teeth problems and kidney problems, you Self Heal is very specific. I don't know why it is. My guess would be that it's demulcent, moistening, soothing, cooling down hot kidneys, supporting their infection, supporting their ability to do their work. Maybe there's an underlying virus. I don't know. But in any case, Self Heal. And I'll tell you a really cool story about Self Heal. I've seen it work when there's both kidney weakness. We'll talk about what kidney weakness looks like in a little bit, and tooth challenges. But I was also working at one point with a woman who had both tooth challenges and kidney weakness. She's a very scattered. She couldn't get herself organized, and then when she did, she didn't have the energy to move forward on her projects. And that's a sign of kidney weakness, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And she's having all these teeth problems. You know, the dentist was like wanting to do this and that and this and that, and she was a bit at her wit's end. And then she had a dream about this green woman came to her in her dreams and said to her, "It's time for self-healing." And she's like, "Oh," woke up, "Oh, I have to do some self-healing." And then she went out, took her dog out to the park for a walk, and came across this huge patch of flowering self-heal. And she went, "Oh, self-heal, right, teeth, kidney, okay, got it." Anyway, self-heal helped her a lot. So what's your dreams when you're struggling with chronic conditions, or you're trying to understand what your body's doing and what the relationship is between these seemingly separate manifestations of imbalance? And ask your clients about dreams. It's always a good idea. Okay, second, circulation. I talked about this a little bit already, but your kidneys really are part of your circulatory system. And they control the tension or relaxation in your blood vessels. They control the movement of fluid in and out of your interstitial fluid, in and out of your blood vessels into your interstitial fluid, which we will have a whole video on interstitial fluid, which is really interesting stuff. Yeah, so that's what the kidneys do. They open and close your arteries. When there's tension, the kidneys are involved. When there's relaxation, the kidneys are involved. The heart pumps the blood through the blood vessels, whether the kidneys making them tight or loose. A really great plant for relaxing the kidneys and in turn relaxing blood vessels is cramp bark. There's a pharmaceutical class of drugs called ACE inhibitors, which interfere with the kidneys opening and closing of the arteries. That process is a complicated angiotensin renin enzyme process. I'm not going to go into that. But what you can know is that cramp bark acts a lot like ACE inhibitors. And cramp bark is a beautiful herb. One just suddenly appeared growing in my garden. I was absolutely thrilled that it appeared there. I use this plant all the time for tension. And when there's tension, I think of tension as a systemic challenge in the body. So you'll feel the tension in the blood vessels when you take someone's pulse. Either if it's a high pulse, you can feel tension there, or a low pulse, you can feel tension. If you're feeling tension, if they're complaining about tension in their body, if they're having a hard time taking a deep breath, that's all tension. Neck pain, tension. That's goes back to the kidney. And I think of cramp bark as a plant that signals the kidneys to relax. And the kidneys relax the blood vessels, improve blood flow, improve the movement of the fire element through the body. The water element carries the fire element in the blood. The improvement of warmth through the body. When we're warm, we relax. So that's how I think of cramp bark's relationship with the kidney and circulation. It's a really fantastic plant. Number 3, controls the movement of minerals in and out of the body. And this has an effect on bone density, and that goes back to the teeth. So these minerals are also called electrolytes, cautions, sometimes they're called. They have all these names. This is one of the things that drives me crazy about anatomy and physiology, is the names for one thing has so many names and people get all mixed up about it. But yeah, so bone density. So if the kidneys are weak, it affects the bones. Luckily, we have plants. Many diuretics are high in minerals. And whereas the volatile oils, plants high in volatile oils like thyme or yarrow or rosemary, chamomile for that matter, they all have a diuretic effect because the volatile oils, the terpenes, these plants contain, irritate those single cell vessels, those single cell tubes that move through the glomeruli, encouraging the release of urine because the kidney's reading those as toxins. We got to flush this out of our body. Whereas another class of diuretics are very high in minerals, or cautions as they're called. And if the body has an excess of minerals, they'll start voiding them out through the kidneys. Okay, so dandelion leaf is a classic diuretic that works like this. It's very high in potassium. A lot of people compare it to a drug called Lasix, which is a commonly used diuretic, particularly in seniors. Watch out for that drug. It can cause problems like dehydration or low blood pressure, although it's often given for high blood pressure. And that drug will deplete the potassium from the body. The person will pee the potassium out, and potassium is essential for smooth contraction and release of all muscles in your body, including your heart. So depletion of potassium affects your heart, and people die if they don't have any potassium. So when a person eats a lot of vegetables are very high in potassium. Potatoes, really high in potassium. Avocados is another one high in potassium. All our plants have potassium in them. Dandelion's particularly high. So often it's associated as a diuretic that can be used as opposed to Lasix, and there's not a depletion of potassium from the body. So dandelion is a diuretic high in potassium. However, it doesn't always have a diuretic action, especially these mineral-rich herbs, because if someone is not eating a lot of vegetables that are high in minerals, they have a mineral depletion in their body. It might be very quiet, but their body will gather the minerals from the teas you're giving them, these are all water soluble constituents in plants. So just use teas, besides you're using them for diuretics. So the more they drink, the better. So you're taking your high mineral teas and your body is storing those minerals. They aren't releasing them. There's a deficiency of minerals, and these plants will not have a diuretic effect if there's a deficiency in minerals. So if someone tells you, you know, they eat some, you know, their vegetables or maybe some canned peas and maybe some frozen corn, that's their vegetable intake, and you're giving them mineral rich herbs for a diuretic effect, it's not going to have that. You're not going to cause an increase in urination. Parsley is another plant that's similar, high in minerals. This is a beautiful plant. It also has the volatile oils, though, so it has a double whammy effect on the urinary tract. You know, I always think as a signature, I had this amazing patch of parsley this year. As a signature, this is like the ureter, which is the tube that connects the bladder with the kidneys. And this looks like, to me, the actual kidney itself hanging off the ureter. See here, this would be the kidney, and here's the ureter. And this goes down to bladder. Okay, so number 4, the fourth thing, releases waste of protein metabolism from the liver, nitrates and ammonium. So that's one of the things the kidneys does. Releases toxins. Traditionally, so here's the kidney sitting right under the liver. Look at how far over that liver goes. Oops. This is the spleen. So traditionally, it was believed that the kidney protect the liver. The kidneys are seen as very vulnerable organs, and we'll get into that traditionally. And the liver was the big protector hanging over the liver. But one of the things I just want to talk about, we touched on this a little bit in the liver talk, about how the ancients believed that the liver would get it had all this blood in it, therefore it was a warm organ, which is true. It's a very bloody place that has a lot of heat, and one of the challenges we say happens with the liver is liver heat, liver congestion. That's more traditional herbal medicine. And so the heat radiates to the surrounding organs. So a really hot liver has a profound effect on the kidneys. The kidneys like to be warm and moist, not hot, warm. And yeah, so that's one way of thinking it. But the other thing too is that in so many ways, the kidneys protect the liver because it will take over the release of water soluble toxins from the liver. It will do all that work. It does all that work for them. So if the liver's working really hard, so are the kidneys. This is cleavers is one of my favorite all-time plants, and I use a lot of cleavers in my practice. I always do use a fresh plant tincture of cleavers, always, 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 if I want really good results. Cleavers is a diuretic again, and it also is considered a lymphatic. So there's this relationship between the lymph system and the kidneys, and okay, so let me just organize my thoughts here. How am I going to convey this massive amount of information I'm just about to download onto you in a good way so you can understand what I'm saying? Okay, so you have your blood vessels, and they have little pores for things to go in and out, especially in your capillary bed. There are also single cell tubes, and single cell tubes are used in the human body, in animal bodies, in nature, for the movement of stuff in and out of the tubes. Okay, and often the tubes are running through sort of an environment, we'll call it. Okay, so in our body, those tubes are running through an environment called the interstitial fluid. You could think of it like it's, yeah, this fluid that your cells are floating in, and these single cell tubes are moving through that fluid, absorbing stuff that needs to be absorbed and eliminated, as well as delivering stuff that's needed to the cells. We're going to talk a lot about interstitial fluid in a whole webinar. So there has to be a tension between the outside of these single cell tubes and the inside. And that tension is created by a protein called albumin. Now, when those single cell tubes get separate out, as in chronic infection or inflammation, to release bigger material like white blood cells into the interstitial fluid to do some managing of the microbiome, a protein called albumin sneaks out those gaps in the single cell tubes as well, in the capillary beds. But the lymphatic system, which usually picks everything back up and sends it through the liver to the kidneys to be eliminated, can't pick up the albumin. Nothing breaks it up. So what happens if over a period of time is all this fluid buildup. There's tension, and often there's pain because of this inner fluid tension buildup in the interstitial fluid. Things just aren't moving. This is a state of great stagnancy. Cleavers is a herb that breaks up that albumin to make it possible for the lymph organs to absorb it, send it through the liver and out through the kidney. And that's why Cleavers has a diuretic action. Super cool. I hope you followed that. Okay, so the kidneys filter between 120 to 150 quarts of blood per day. That's a lot of blood. The thing is, though, often we're presented with a circulatory picture like this, and the kidney should be sitting right here where this body is. So I always want you to think of like the kidneys as part of the circulatory system. And a lot of times in herbal medicine, we talk about, wow, the first thing is always absorption of nutrients, right? Like, what's the health of the small intestine? Like, what are the stomach acids like? We talk about that. Like, is there enough bile coming from the liver? We talk about like that. But all those nutrients have to get moved through the body. And that's up to the circulatory system. And the kidney has a key role in that, in the tension and relaxation of the blood vessels. So circulation, think kidney. Okay, so this is something that clinical herbalists see in their practice, and it's called nephrotoxicity or renal toxicity. Renal is another word for kidney. Ren is kidney in French, so it comes from the French word for kidney, ren. Ren, I'm pretty sure. Limited, okay, so this is basically because the kidneys are involved in the elimination of toxins. Remember the heavy metals that the kidney releases, the heavy metals from the body. They can get overwhelmed with toxins. And what are these toxins? Alcohol, it's a big problem. Heavy metals, cocaine, people in recovery support their kidneys, or people who are using support their kidneys. But the big ones are the NSAIDs, the non-steroids, anti-inflammatory over-the-counter drugs, like ibuprofen. They can cause kidney damage, irrevocable kidney damage. And we need to talk about this a lot more as herbalists to our clients who have chronic pain and really work on pain. And I will be doing a webinar on working with people in pain, because you will see a lot of people in pain. And these drugs are overconsumed. So often, you have this kind of thing. But let me tell you this crazy story about the kidneys storing toxins. So I have a friend, and when he was a kid, he would go to the doctor every month for an allergy shot. And he would sit in this room waiting for the doctor to come, and then the doctor would give him a shot and he'd go home. He did that for like 3-4 years. So he grows up a little bit. The allergies seem to go away. He stops going for that shots. Grows up a little bit more, he kind of becomes one of the, back to the landers, and he's living in this remote area, trying to live off the land, and he's doing a lot of fasting, drinking a lot of herbal teas. And during one particular fast where he was drinking a lot of herbal teas, it was hot out and he was chopping wood and he was sweating. And then he went inside his little cabin and he noticed he kind of smelled like that doctor's office. So at this point, he's like 28 years old. And he's like, ooh, I smell like that doctor's office. What a weird smell. And he takes off his shirt and the smell is in his shirt. So he was sweating the smell out. And he looks at his shirt, and right where it had been over his kidneys, there was this dark circle from the sweat. The sweat was like this darker than all the other sweat on his shirt. And he smelt it, and it smelled like this synthetic drug. And he was like, whoa. And he figures that was the allergy shots coming out that had been stored in his kidneys all those years. So there's this great, oops, no, I don't want to leave me. I want to go back to my screen, sorry. Buttons, we live in this weird button pushing world. Okay, so I want to put this down. Okay, so this is a great way to help support your kidneys in clearing toxins. And I'm just going to go off this video and describe it to you, and then I'll bring it back. So you get some nice organic juicy ginger, and you grate it, and you grate about as much that fills the palm of your hand like this. Okay, so you want that much. And then you wrap it up in cheesecloth, and in the meantime you have a little pot of water on the boil. You take that cheesecloth and you get a little saucer, okay, and put the cheesecloth in the boiling water and go 1, 2, 3. Take the cheesecloth out, let it sit on the little saucer for a moment, and then you put it back in. 1, 2, 3. Take it out of the boiling water, let it sit for a minute, not even a minute, just a moment, like 1, 2, 3, and then back in the boiling water for the last time. 1, 2, 3. And you take it out and you let it sit on that little saucer, and you wait for it to be cool down enough that you can actually put it on your skin without burning you. And then you put it over your kidneys and your mid back. And I like to tie a scarf around it to hold it in place. And then I usually just sit down and read a book. That's what I usually do. And I'll just sit there for a while. Sometimes I'll put a hot water bottle over it to help keep the heat in there a little bit longer. And it is the most beautiful, kidney nourishing, toxin processing poultice for the kidneys you can possibly imagine. I tend to do this about once a week in the winter when it's really cold. People don't like poultices because they're messy and they have prep time and all that. But this kidney poultice with ginger is so worth it. So I'm just going to show you that screen for a moment in case you didn't catch all that. And there's different ways people do this poultice. Google it. You'll find lots of information about the ginger poultice on the kidneys. But this is traditionally used to help the kidneys deal with toxins and also to warm up cold kidneys. Or people who have weak kidneys are showing early signs of kidney failure. This is a great remedy. You can do it for another person. You just have them lay down on a bed, a massage table, and place the kidney poultice over them and up and down, replace it it's a really beautiful treatment. So let's talk about historical ideas of the kidney. I love looking at how people have thought about the body, especially considering herbal medicine has been around us since our very first brews or cut as human beings, how animals, use herbal medicine. And so I like to look at how language that was used by other folks to talk about their bodies and plants, because sometimes I find for me, it gives me a hint of how to think about the plants in a bigger way and their relationship with the body is a really, yeah. So as opposed to sort of get into this micro world of reductionist medicine. So in the Old Testament, it's the kidneys were considered the most inner stirring of one's emotional life. So one could almost say that the kidneys were the deepest underlying motives of your life, which you could actually say maybe your kidneys are carrying your karma, because those deep underlying emotions are what drive us into actions, are what affect our choices. So the kidneys were like this place of deep longing, deep knowing in the old days. And in the ancient Jewish sacred text, there was one kidney that offered good advice and one kidney that offered bad advice. So that's, again, that duality we live in. Like, our neighbor's done something that's really annoyed us, and part of us wants to go and, do something, knock over their garbage pail or something. And another part of us, no, forgive. Yeah. I love my neighbor. I have never knocked over his garbage pail. The kidney was considered, and in like, this is, way back, Old Testament days, was considered the core of the person. But it was also because of where the kidney is in the body. It's like protected by the liver, it's surrounded by fat, it's underneath the rib cage, it's deep inside the body. They were thought as the most protected parts of the body, and therefore must be, this was the logic, the most vulnerable part of the body. So the kidneys were considered to offer a sacrifice of the kidneys to the gods was considered the highest sacrifice, the greatest sacrifice you could make was kidneys. But also eating kidneys was considered a way of restoring that essential health in one's being. So kidneys are like the seeds of life, and seeds are specific to kidney health. Every seed. There is not a single seed that does not support the health of the kidney. Like, we even have like kidney beans, So eat lots of seeds. Take legumes. They're very good for the kidney. The big herbal seed I always think is the nettle seed, and the nettle seed is considered a kidney tropha restorative. So kidneys rule our hair and our vigor. So there's these stories of these old horse traders. This is an old UK story where they would buy these old horses, worn out, poor old horses, so worn out. They were doing all the work. They did a lot of work for human beings for a long time, horses. And they'd buy these old horses, with dull coats and bad teeth and saggy backs and just tired, poor muscle mass. And they'd buy them and feed them nettle seed. And before you know it, their vigor returned. They had shiny coats, their teeth were better, their eyes were brighter, and they had a little jaunt to their step. and they would take them to auction and sell them for a better price than they would have if they hadn't fed these horses nettle seed. So nettle seed is a kidney restorative. It's considered a plant that returns vitality via the kidneys. It has so much vitality, the nettle seed, that monks in the Middle Ages were not allowed to take them. Too much libido would happen with the nettle seed. So the only caution I have about nettle seed is sometimes if someone is really depleted and you give them something that really perks them up a little too quickly, people can find them too energizing. The great thing about herbal medicine is you can always do a dose thing. You can take less or you can take more. So if someone's finding nettle seeds a little too energizing, because they definitely carry energy, you just take less. Yeah, I'm like kind of like a lazy herbalist. I just fresh plant tincture my nettle seed, and I always have some nettle leaf in with my nettle seed tincture. And yeah, it's amazing medicine. Okay, so let's take a look at what the traditional Chinese medicine has to teach us about the kidney. Again, I'm not a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicines. I am seriously not an expert in Chinese medicine. However, I do have profound respect for that modality of herbal medicine. And I do like the way this tradition of medicine talks about the body in relationship to the elements and in relationship to the landscape. So in traditional Chinese medicine, I really like that it puts health in context to the environment that the person's living in. And I think that's one of the main missing components of our of the industrial medical complex, is the person is taken totally out of context of their environment. And I really think herbalists need to put the people they support in context of their environment. So traditional Chinese medicine has this language, so that's one of the reasons why I love it. So it's interesting that in Chinese medicine, they have this energy called Jing, and they have two: prenatal Jing and postnatal Jing. And this is like the energy from our ancestors, the prenatal Jing. And it's like, it reminds me of this idea of the kidneys carrying the essence of our emotional desires, the essence of our desires, the essence of how we want to move through this life. And I personally believe a lot of that comes through our ancestors. Our DNA is made by our ancestors. Our language is often the language of our ancestors. Our understanding of our relationship to the environment often comes to us through our ancestors. So this basic how we think of ourselves in the world comes to us through the ancestors. And all this, for me, is related to constitution. I'm going to talk about that word in a moment. So the kidneys contain the life force, or everything our ancestors learned. Let's put it that way. All their gifts and all their wounds are contained in the kidneys. And then there's also a postnatal Jing. So this is the life force energy that we receive from food and air and clean water. One of the things that I think is so beautiful about traditional Chinese medicine, again, is the context in which it happens, the human being in relationship to the environment they live in. And this spot here on the bottom of the foot is called kidney 1 as an acupuncture, and it's called the gushing spring. I also consider this, I'm going to get a little woo on you, is a chakra in the bottom of your foot. In some traditions of esoteric traditions, they're seen as a chakra here in this part of your foot, and it's about your connection to the earth. And this is kidney 1, gushing spring, and there's underneath wherever you are in the world, underneath your feet somewhere is a spring of water. There is groundwater. There is this vast network of water underneath our feet somewhere. And Kidney 1 connects us, I believe, with that groundwater underneath our feet. And if you think about remember I talked about that initial quality of water as sticky. Water sticks, it's sticky. If you put 2 drops side by side, they'll go boom, stick, rivers stick together, water likes to stick. It's what holds us together, the water. It's sticky. And I think of this gushing spring deep in the earth, calling us, bringing us down into the earth, sticking us to the earth, connecting us here with this earth. And that's related to this part of our foot. We have this relationship in this part of our foot with the depth of that water underneath us, underneath our feet. And that water carries this life force. We're born from water. We breathe water. We are water, essentially. That energy of the water under the earth comes up through our feet and comes into our kidneys and supports and nourishes that deep knowledge that our kidneys has about how to move water through our bodies. So just some things to think about. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about prenatal Jing. So these are our ancestors. And what do our ancestors want? Well, they want us to carry on. They want their DNA to keep moving along, right? So prenatal Jing is essentially about reproductive cycles. I think one of the interesting places where we can look at prenatal Jing would be like hair and tooth loss. Again, back to the teeth, hair, weakening of bones, and a weakening of memory. This is really important. It can, and they say prenatal Jing can be replenished with good food, clean water, deep breathing, and some movement. The other thing important is prenatal Jing is weakened by severe impact of illness or trauma. So a lot of times you'll hear in traditional Chinese medicine people talking about the kidneys carrying fear. And I'm always like, taking a concept from a culture that I am not from, I do not understand. This teaching is ancient, it comes to us from people who live directly on the land. And I'm sure their emotional intelligence was different than our emotional intelligence, their relationship with emotions was different. So what are we talking about when we say fear? So I look up the word for fear, or one of the words for fear, in Mandarin, and I find it's made of 2 different words. And one is He, which means harm, evil, kill, and calamity. And the second is Pa, which translates into fear, afraid, and dread. And so He Pei is often translated as scared, to dread, to lose courage, to be unable to endure, and to worry. And these are all signs of a weak kidney. The fear, the dread, the loss of courage, the unable to endure, and the worry. Those are all signs of weak kidney. And I just want to say, because the kidneys carry on a more energetic level the gifts and the wounds of the ancestors, it's often as sort of like an intergenerational trauma that causes that unknown fear, that sense of dread, that loss of courage, the not knowing how to manifest your life, not knowing how to move forward, that kind of like worry that something's going to happen. Often that's coming through transgenerational trauma, in my personal experience as well. And a lot of personal trauma people experience is directly related to trauma their ancestors related. So I'm thinking that this is this is a interesting idea of, as opposed to just saying, oh, the kidneys carry fear, is more like, okay, so what is that fear? And I'm going to go with a loss of courage. Trauma limits our ability to make decisions, limits our ability to respond in a meaningful way. And often there's courage needed for this. So I just want to look at what my next slide is. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you as opposed to have that little picture. Okay. So I want you to think, okay, so the kidneys is a lack of courage. And I want you to think about the liver. Remember, we talked about the liver in the liver video and how often it said the liver carries anger. And I compared the liver energy to spring, where the liver energy is the ability of the dandelion to grow up through the crack of the cement. That's liver energy. Liver, when it's the energy's not moving well, the emotions aren't moving well through the liver, is like frustrated creative energy. Being a creative, it takes courage to create, and it takes courage to put your creations into the world. And that courageousness comes from the kidney. So there's this relationship between the courage, the ability to manifest the gifts your ancestors have given you, and manifest them as the liver does. But the word courage comes to us from the French word corps, heart, to have good heart. That's what the word courage means, to have good heart. And the kidney's relationship with the heart, how it helps the heart, it supports the heart in pumping the blood through the blood, creating the warmth, the relaxation, the openness of the body. So to take, and trauma often like closes our heart, makes us fearful, makes us less resistant to moving forward in our life, moving forward in a good way. So it's like this relationship between the kidneys and the heart and the liver to manifest our life with good heart in a creative, dynamic way. And that's the support of the kidneys. And this goes back to this idea of giving the kidney lots of nourishing seeds to support that courage it carries. Okay, and just another really interesting thing about kidney and fear is the kidneys use up 25% of the oxygen from the lungs. So 25% of all the oxygen you breathe goes to the kidneys for their function, which is amazing. So, in fear, we hold our breath, and that has a direct impact on the health of the kidneys. So that's just another little linking. So by releasing the breath using plants like cramp bark or lobelia inflata, we support the health of the kidneys. Yeah, so this is cordyceps. This is like my personal favorite mushroom, fungi. And I really think cordyceps is a plant that helps nourish the courage in the kidneys. The kidney energy comes from the earth. I always I like to think about mushrooms and plants and compare them. And one of the two mushrooms I use the most are reishi mushrooms and cordyceps mushrooms. And so I always think of reishi mushrooms as energy coming down from the sky. And I always think of cordyceps as energy coming up from the earth, and as a very nourishing earth energy coming up. And it's the energy of support. And the kidneys, that's what they need. They need the support. And cordyceps is an amazing tonic for the kidneys, especially when there's profound fatigue in the body. Profound fatigue. People who've been through chronic illness or really invasive medical treatment from, yeah, or extreme shock, extreme loss. Cordyceps really builds the body from the ground up, and in that it nourishes that core vulnerability that the kidneys carry. Burdock. I love burdock. I have to go out and dig up my burdock roots very shortly. It's been raining the last couple of days, though, so I never like to dig up roots after it's been raining. But in any case, so burdock, yeah. So it's your classic plant for dryness and wasting. Again, you'll see dryness in the body, cracks in the tongue, dry skin, a lot of thirst. That's all related to weak kidney, and you want to put moisture into the body. And burdock root is such a nourishing, moist plant. It's a beautiful plant for the kidney. And don't be scared to use the seeds. Be a little scared about like taking the seeds out of the burr because they hurt like heck. But yeah, if you can find the seeds or make medicine with the seeds yourself, they're also extremely nourishing for the kidney. Seeds are good for kidney. Astragalus is an amazing kidney herb. It's actually one of the herbs that I use when there's nephrotoxicity to nourish the kidney. Again, it's very moistening herb, very specific to supporting the kidney. I've heard it's used quite successfully with dialysis patients. And Schisandra, and Schisandra is also a tropho-restorative for the kidney. So I wonder if it goes back to the relationship with the mitochondria, but also all those flavonoids in Schisandra really support the health of those single cell capillaries that run throughout the kidney. So health of the circulation through the kidney, health of the mitochondria. Yeah, Schisandra is a great kidney herb. And at the same time, you're supporting the liver. Okay, so little astrology, what are they called? Medical astrology. Venus, kidneys ruled by Venus. Venus is considered warm and moist, prefers harmony over chaos. Diseases of ruled by Libra, which is the sign. Venus is the planet. Libra is for diseases or nervous exhaustion. Okay, so the key word here is harmony, and chaos equals tension. And the kidneys don't like tension. They like to be relaxed, chill. They have the courage. They like to consider their next move in a good way. Yeah, and they weigh things. Remember the good and the bad from the Jewish teaching of the kidney. They like to weigh things and consider and then move forward with courage, send the energy to the liver to come through and manifest, with good heart. So tension is not their friend. Tension kind of pushes one into making a decision. Not their friend. So sometimes I think about, we talk about kidney herbs, and then we talk about like circulatory herbs and liver herbs, but really any herb you put in the body affects the entire body. And this is particularly true with kidney. If there's tension in the body, if people are complaining about tension in their mind, they can't stop thinking, or they're not sleeping well, tension in their neck, their pulse is high in tension, they're too tense to eat in a good way, they're constipated because of tension, that's affecting the kidney. But you could use a really lovely tropho restorative for the nervous system, like milky oat seed, which is probably my favorite tropho restorative for the nervous system. And that will support the liver health. This is a nourishing plant that moistens a hot, dry body. A hot, dry body means there's a hot, dry kidney. So you can use a plant like milky oat seed in your formulas to support the health of the kidneys. It's a little indirect, but if you quiet down the nervous system and and ease tension out of the nervous system, you're supporting the health of the kidney. Salt. So when people eat a lot of salt, right, those fries, lots of salt, they retain fluid. Salt collects the water element. Salt pulls the water element together. So let's think about salt. I'm going to tell you a story. I have a confession that I have a bit of a potato chip thing. I like potato chips. So I live in the country. I've lived in the country for a long time, and I go into the city once in a while. And I had this thing where I would go into the city to run my errands, and I'd be in like 4 or 5 different places, navigating parking lots, navigating traffic, all that. And as I came out of the city to go home, I would stop and buy a bag of potato chips and eat the potato chips on the way home. And I'm like, what's going on here? Why is this when I'm eating the potato chips, trying to eat healthy and all that? Then I realized, I come out of that city scattered. I feel like I'm in pieces all over the city now. And when I eat the potato chips, by the time I get home, I feel collected back together. I feel centered and grounded. So let's think about the water element. The water element is sticky. It sticks us together. When we're scattered, we're lacking the water element. And by eating salt, it gathers us back together. It pulls the water element back together, which in turn pulls us back together. We are mostly water. So salt is important, especially if there's a lot of scattered mind. Take some salt, which is really applicable today. Like, yeah, someone was trying to tell me to go on TikTok the other day, and I was just thinking, oh my God, what would that do to my brain? Anyways, the big plant for salt is celery. You need celery. Celery is a salty plant. It has a salty taste. Celery seeds, even more so. So next time you have someone who has a scattered mind, try giving them a little bit of celery seed in their medicine, or have them put a little celery seed on their desks to nibble on throughout the day. That's what I did, and it really, really helped me. Salt gathers us back together. It pulls the water element back together. And in working with the water element, it has an effect on the kidney. So just consider salt. Okay, signs and symptoms. The kidney needs support. Thirst and cracks. You'll see cracks in this tongue. That's kidney needs support. The kidney does not like to be dry. Scattered mind, fatigue. And I'm like talking like chronic fatigue. You're just tired all the time. See, this poor person can't even stand up straight. They're so tired. Achy legs, tired legs. Like if you're standing a lot and your legs are getting tired, that's kidney weakness. That's a really good sign for cordyceps. This is cordyceps. This is cordyceps. This is more celery seed. Maybe some cordyceps too. Pain in this part of your back, it's really, this you actually want to be cautious and maybe see if there's been any fever or chills, or if there's been a history of bladder infection, because this could be actually quite serious. Could be a kidney infection, and kidney infections is go to doctor or hospital right away. You don't really mess with kidney infection. Like you can work with herbs while someone has a kidney infection to help resolve it in a good way and have it resolved. It is resolved. The plants will help you do that. But I would definitely recommend antibiotics if there's a kidney infection. Puffiness under the eyes. Again, remember puffiness. Golden seal is my plant, or goldenrod is my plant for puffiness. Small acne is a sign that the kidneys are having a hard time working with toxins. The small little pimples, not the big cystic acne, but the small ones. That's poor kidney. different colors of urine. Yeah, and I don't work with urinalysis in my practice. I've never been trained in it. I guess I could start training myself in it, but I did work with this older woman once, and she had lived way in this rural area as a kid, and the doctor did house calls, and her mom would make everybody pee in a cup just before the doctor came, and he would assess each person through their urine and their urine alone. So it's an old system of assessment of someone's health. Urine. Ears are specific to the kidney. Eyes are liver. Ears are kidney. So a high pitched tinging in the ear is a high pitched tinnitus is associated more with kidney. You might be also thinking, and be careful, like when I say that, remember we're talking about different functions of the kidney. So we're talking about maybe tension in the blood vessels. I have seen amazing things by releasing tension in blood vessels with high-pitched tinnitus, as long as they didn't go to too many AC/DC concerts and sit too close to the speakers, or as a teenager, they were into like amps and electric guitars, that kind of stuff. There can be mechanical damage, which is really hard to resolve, but high-pitched tinnitus is associated with tension in the kidneys, which means there's tension in the blood vessels. Just one time I had this guy, I was standing around talking to some folks randomly, and this guy asked me about this high-pitched tinnitus, and I just looked at him and I said, "Oh, how about some St. John's wort?" And boom, that tinnitus was gone. And he had had it like for 2 or 3 years. And I think it was probably about the tension. A low pitch ringing ear is more associated with liver. Corn silk. I just needed to throw corn silk in here because I love corn silk. I use corn silk a lot in urinary tract challenges, and I'll also use it if there's just weak kidney. I don't know, just love growing corn, love having corn, love corn silk. It's a demulcent, so it soothes the membranes associated with the urinary tract. A really beautiful support for both healing the underlying tissues of the mucous membrane as well as the microbalance within the urinary tract. And to finish up, I just thought I'd do a little formulation for kidney infections, urinary tract infections, because I see a lot of urinary tract infections. So some of my favorite herbs are yarrow, high in volatile oils, high in tannins. The volatile oils have antimicrobial activities, as do tannins. They bind the protein heads on the bacteria, causing it to clump together, making it more difficult for the bacteria to move around. Very important if it's a bladder infection, you don't want that bacteria to crawl up those ureters to the kidney. If there's some excoriation underneath the mucous membrane on the underlying tissues, yarrow will help heal that up. Meadowsweet, I remember this old German formula that I used, and meadowsweet just was amazing in that formula for the urinary tract. And we often don't think about it as a urinary tract infection plant, but again, it's like has all those tannins in it. Couch grass, it's similar kind of to corn silk, a demulcent for the urinary tract, like D-mannose is like the supplement people take. And then the rose hips is the vitamin C, but also to protect all those little blood vessels in the blood vessels. So this is like a urinary tract formula that I use. I might add a little of this or a little of that to it, but it's sort of the base. So that is a whole lot of information about kidney, some ways to think about kidneys, some way about thinking about kidneys and plants, trying to put kidney in context to the whole of life. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the community chat. I will check that every week. And yeah, I hope you check out further videos and let me know what you want to hear, what you want me to talk about. Okay, thanks. Have a good day. Bye.